Hi, everybody. This is the introduction to Christology Worship of the Word Outline. We're going to just be asking a few questions related to things like what is Christology, what does it have to do with, and maybe even just going through a brief survey of the entire outline you have here. What I'm trying to do is help our singers, our musicians, and our worship leaders and our prayer leaders to have a better understanding about Christology. And I've said it to a couple of the teams, but it does need to be known. This is a little more difficult than a lot of our other outlines, this Christology, because it's a little bit different. We're going to have to dig a little bit more. So what is Christology? Well, Christology is a branch of theology specifically concerning things that have to do with Jesus. So there are branches of Christology, which are the ontological, which is the nature, the pre-existent Christ, the Christ being fully divine, being fully human. There's functional Christology, which is the works of Jesus, the things that he actually did. And then there is, lastly, there is the soteriological, which is the salvation. What did Jesus do in saving? Now, some of these words you're going to hear these, and some of the people, it's going to just turn you off. Don't worry about any of this. I'm just saying this more for just information's sake. Don't be worried. You don't have to memorize any of these things. You don't have to know this. But just so you understand, what I want to do is when we go through this Christology outline, I want it to be when you're singing through these things, that the Word of God and the truths about God, which a lot of these things when we're talking about Christology, a lot of Christology is just putting concrete phrases or things that we already know and kind of bringing them all together in a way that we could all communicate in a way and know what we're all talking about. So if you've never been to seminary or Bible college, don't worry about it. I'm just, like I said, going to teach you a few little words, a few little things. Don't be turned off by this. This is going to help you grow in your relationship with the Lord, grow in your ability to understand the Bible, and you might learn something new along the way. So a lot of the ways that, there's really basically two ways when you're talking about Christology that people come at it. And there is high Christology, which is where you start at the pre-existent, and then there's low Christology. Now, these don't mean good or bad. It's just where are you going to start? You're going to start at the top, you're going to start at the bottom. And then there's low Christology, which is where you start with Jesus doing human things on the earth. I'm hoping that in doing this, we will blend all of these things together to give us a rich, because this is really what it's about, a rich understanding of who Jesus is and what did he do. And what did he do? What is he going to do? What is he doing? What is he going to do? If this just comes, I don't want this to be something where we're just getting information stuck and swirling around in our heads. I want this to be something that is alive, what the Bible will call living understanding inside of our hearts. So I want to blend all of these things together to give us a richer understanding, richer living understanding. Jesus said in John 14, because Philip asked this question, where he says, hey, haven't we been with you for so long, Jesus? We've been with you for this long. Can you show us, open our eyes and show us the Father? And Jesus says in John 14:7, he says, if you really knew me, you would know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So when we look at Jesus, when we learn about Jesus, when we look at Jesus, we can see the Father and what Jesus is and what Jesus has done. We can look at that and it gives us a very clear picture of who God is, who the Father is. So Jesus is the great stumbling block of faith. It is in him that Christianity finds its uniqueness among the religions of the world. He is the incarnate Son of God, the unique revelation of the Father. Yet so often we begin the process of theological formation, not with the person of Jesus, but rather with philosophical arguments about God's existence and logical constructions to determine God's nature. How our understanding be affected if we just instead took a look at Jesus as the starting place. So instead of starting with these bigger ideas and maybe philosophical ideas, that we start by looking at Jesus, or even scriptures about Jesus. We look at those first. So we want to look at Jesus, and therefore we'll see the Father. So let's just quickly go through the outline. You can get yours out. You can find this on the volunteer page, and you're on the volunteer. If you're watching this, you're on the volunteer page. You find this in the resource section, and we're just going to go through each part, and I'm just going to kind of give you the big targets. So, cycle 1, which is Colossians 1:15, 16, 18, and 19. So I'll just read it out really quick, and then I'll just kind of give you the thoughts on it. So he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, through him and for him. In heaven and earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions, rulers and authority. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile all things, reconcile himself all things, making peace by the blood of the cross. So we can see at the top that there is a title to every single one of the cycles that kind of gives us, when I think about the cycle, I want to have that big picture of this is the big target, and maybe the title itself being maybe the center, where if we could have all these peripheral things that we're kind of hitting, as long as we're hitting the target, no problem. But we're trying to hit that middle, and what's kind of the middle of the road, big target kind of thing, and that is the first cycle. It's about Jesus. It's Jesus, the firstborn of creation and of the dead. And if you go through this, the things that we can see is specifically it talks about firstborn. The firstborn meaning that he is the first of all things. He is before all things. He is the one that's ahead of the line. It says here that he's preeminent, that he might be the first, that he would actually have, like he has dibs on things. He is the one that's before all things. And he is ahead of the line and before all things with all creation. That he is the firstborn. He is the first, the preeminent of all things, whether they're invisible or invisible. It goes through this whole list. If it isn't God, he is before it. That's the way, the Hebrew thought was, we'll maybe go through this on the next video, specifically related on this, but the idea that if it isn't creation, it's God. That was a Hebrew thought, Second Temple Judaism, a big thing was, you're either in one of two categories. You're either creator or creation. Creator or creation. And Jesus fits into the creator box. He is in that box of creator. And he is the first of creation, but he also, we can see that not only is he the first of creation, he's the firstborn of all creation, but he also is the firstborn from the dead. He is the first fruits of those who are a part of the resurrection. So we can see that he is the Alpha, specifically related to that of creation and that of the resurrection. Okay, so second cycle. And like I said, I'm going to go into more detail in each of these in the next videos. Second cycle is Jesus, the lowly servant, exalted forever as king, which is Philippians 2:6-11. Though he was in the form of God, he did not account equality with God as something to be asserted, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus, every knee would bow, every in heaven and earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So this is all related to Jesus being the servant of all. This one who came from heaven, pre-existent Christ, or we call it the the Christ from eternity past, who took on flesh to become a servant to all, and that they call it, in many commentaries, call it the, my brain is not working right now, but it's where he goes down. It's like this V pattern. He goes down and then he goes up, and it's a divine exaltation, the humiliation to exaltation. And you see that full story right here in this story. He goes down in humility, and then he goes up, but not just humility. So we'll talk about that in the next one. But it's not just humbly he took on flesh, but he took on humiliation with death on the cross. Humility and flesh and humiliation in the cross. And because he did this, God lifted him up, exalted him, and made him King of Kings, that he was able to be King of Kings and Lord of Lords to the glory of God. Okay, cycle 3 is Jesus redeemed us by his blood for partnership and for pleasure. And so Ephesians 1:4, 7, 10. For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us for adoption to sonship through Jesus Christ, in accordance with according to his pleasure and will. In him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins, to be put into effect when the times reach their fulfillment, to bring unity to all things in heaven and on earth. So, there's another place we see this kind of pre-existent Christ, not pre-existent, but the pre-incarnate Christ. And the pre-incarnate Christ, he doesn't have a body. He doesn't have a human body. And that in that place, before the foundations of the world, that he chose us to be holy and blameless. And he predestined us to be in his family, to be sons in his family, be adopted in accordance with his pleasure. And we see that his blood brings redemption, which I'll talk more about this idea of redemption in the third video. And, I guess it's the fourth video, but the third cycle video. And that his redemption, what he did on the cross, when he brought salvation, that one of the things that he did was he didn't just redeem mankind, he redeemed creation. He didn't just redeem mankind, he redeemed all of creation. And so he will be the king of everything, and therefore if he's the king, he's not just before everything, he's above everything. So he isn't just the firstborn of creation, like he's ahead of the line, he's the very first person, the leader, but he's actually over them. That everything is placed under his feet. And we can see that specifically here, it says later on in 20, which we're not going to get to, Ephesians 1:20. I might talk about that in the video as well. But the idea that everything in creation would be put under the feet of Jesus, that he would be he would rule and reign, and that he as the intercessor, Jesus the intercessor, that all things will be brought together because he is fully God and fully man. Fully God, fully man. He is the divine bridge between the creator and creation. He's this divine bridge. And in him, all things are brought together because he brings all things, all creation into himself, and then brings it together with the divine, with God the Father, and all things will be brought together. And we'll talk about that more in the fourth video. And the last cycle is Jesus, our sovereign God and King. And this is Hebrews 1:3, 4, 8, and 9. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature. And he upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purifications for sin, he sat down at the right hand of majesty on high, having become as much more superior to the angels as the name he had inherited is more excellent than theirs. But of the Son, he says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. Scepter of righteousness is the scepter of your kingdom. And you have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness beyond your companions. And we see here some things that echo stuff from the other, and a lot of these are going to have familiar things or same things related to one another, but they each will have their own specific bent or focus or kind of what they're going for. And as you can see here, this is related to Jesus being our God and our King. And you see at the end that it actually takes scripture straight from the Psalms. It takes quotes directly from Psalm 45. And we see that this is another one of those verses where he is the glory, the brilliance, the brightness of God. And he is an imprint or an icon of his nature. And we can see that all of Hebrews is really a look, because Hebrew thought, just for kind of big picture, Hebrew thought at the time there was this, Hebrews is great because you can really see that it is. Colossians is kind of a argument about this as well, that they believed that there was a divine hierarchy in the heavenlies. That, there was these divine, and there was these not just divine hierarchy, but there was basically, think of it almost like demigods. It was kind of a weird, like they brought in some of this Greek thought, and it kind of added these strange, like Second Temple Judaism added some kind of strange ideas. You don't see it so much in the church, but in that time in Judaism, you could actually see where they were these intermediary beings that were involved in creation and kind of had maybe demigod status. I know it was really strange. We don't really have to deal with a lot of that today because, we kind of, got rid of it through church history. We kind of got rid of a lot of those thoughts. We're like, yeah, that's not what happened. And the writer of Hebrews specifically, and Paul in Colossians, kind of have this whole argument that they're like, no. He specifically is talking about Jesus, and Jesus has a name better, and he is God. He's not like God. He's not just a creation of God, but he is God himself. And he's exact representation. He is a one-for-one copy, and he's not even a copy where you couldn't tell the difference. They look so similar that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two. And we can see, like I said, it culminates in the Psalm 45, which is where he uses most of his, the writer uses most of their quotes from the Old Testament to kind of say this. So, I hope that this kind of can help you, just kind of going through it and just kind of learning some of the things about it. But I hope you're able to watch the other videos, as I will kind of maybe take 5 minutes on each to kind of walk through and give you some, some different quotes or some different Bible verses to kind of help you through that. Okay, thank you.